to Truman's Town Hall with your host, Matt Truman.
Hello. My name is Matthew Doc Truman. Thank you for watching Truman's Town Hall. Today we have Marcell Strbich. Did I say that right? Or
said it better than most.
All right. Welcome. Today we're going to have a conversation. Marcell is running for the Republican Party's in the Republican Party primary for Ohio Secretary of State. I'm just going to do a little introduction. Marcell served his country for 20 years as an Air Force intelligence officer. Over his 20-year career as Lieutenant Colonel Strbich served in a variety of leadership positions, including airborne intelligence officer, instructor, evaluator on Joint Stars aircraft, headquarters policy and strategic advisor, Joint Task Force Special Operations information planner, and director of intelligence and reconnaissance for National Task Force missions worldwide. He is a combat veteran and deployed 5 times during Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom, flying 117 missions and over 1,200 combat hours planned and directing full spectrum intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance collection operations in support of worldwide counter-terrorism operations. So there's a little introduction for Mr. Strbich. Let's begin by tell us a little bit about your early life and family and things like that.
Well, I grew up in Chicago, Illinois, a little ways away from Ohio, but very much Midwest, small business-minded family. Parents came from Europe. Mom and dad came 1970, escaped communism, set up a small family restaurant business, put the kids to work very early. Spent majority of my youth up until 18 working with my brother and sister in that restaurant business, 50 style diners. So very used to interacting with the public, serving people, work ethic, all that built in there. And then 9/11 happened. My brother went into the service. I wanted to join him. I'm the youngest of 3. And everyone was moved to do something about the terrorism that struck our country and the complacency that we had at the time, and to take action. And from there, I was commissioned as an officer at Indiana University through the ROTC program, top of the class. So they gave me my what we call our Air Force service code, our profession. So I chose intelligence. And really within the matter of the first year of becoming an officer, I was sent overseas to fly intelligence, reconnaissance, surveillance missions over Iraq and Afghanistan to provide combat mission support to ground forces to protect them against IEDs and other means, and also to interdict what we call enemy combatants and that kind of thing. So first 10 years, very active in the realm of deploying downrange, went to Africa, supported operations against Al-Shabaab, an Al-Qaeda militant group of Somalis. And then, shifted gears with the Army Rangers downrange and during the surge of Afghanistan. Then I finished the last 10 years of my military service working with emerging disruptive technologies. Worked for the Vice Chairman, Joint Chiefs, where I provided that strategic policy advisement. I was given a $25 billion portfolio for modernizing information systems. So it was a rapid career, and I never envisioned going into politics.
Excellent. That's a lengthy career. What made you decide that, hey, I'm going to run for the Ohio Secretary of State?
Well, it was kind of one of those things that progresses, right? So again, I was a lieutenant colonel, maybe 4 or 5 more years before I had left in the service. I was already committed to going back to Ohio, where I met my wife. I got married in Ohio in Delaware County, and we committed to go back. She had been working remote the whole time, and at that point, I had a couple kids, and I was looking forward to the civilian life. But then, of course, we saw what was a very corrupt election take place. And we saw an about face in our country in terms of the way the Biden administration took their policies. And that reflected itself in Ohio, with businesses being shut down, the elections being canceled, an assortment of issues, problems arose. Even in the military, a system where we were oriented around merit, introduced these social ideologies like diversity, equity, inclusion. It really started to drift. And overnight, those of us who served downrange who held firm to our conscience and our beliefs and attested to the Constitution were alluded to as though we were domestic extremists, right? And the policies changed with COVID mandates. And it seemed to me like those of us who didn't want to go along to get along with that administration's approach were singled out for non-promotion. And some people even say it was a purge. Whatever it was, I knew it wasn't right. And I didn't feel like it reflected my institutional values and why I even entered the military. So I did my part to push back against this and to help other service members, because I was a senior officer at that point, put in for religious accommodation requests, medical exemptions. And the whole time, the lawyers of that administration were looking for ways to illegally misinterpret that law, to mete out intimidation and coercion. So we fought that. And then I realized, if the military, like the police forces in 2020, were under that direct level of push to, change their ethos, right, the warrior ethos, and to undermine them, then what institution is left? If we don't have the military, we don't have the security or protective forces at home, where does that leave our country? So I committed to go back to Ohio and get involved. And I did back in 2022, locally in Montgomery County here, where you and I reside, I believe. And the idea was,
but
yeah, exactly. So the idea here it came down to was what's happening locally. And I found out that even here in Ohio, there was a lack of public oversight, transparency, and accountability. There was an election that took 20 days to count that was reversed from the day of elections here in a local commissioner race. And that's when I set out and I realized, while I was very much about medical freedom, the whole episode of where our country started to go downhill really had to do with an election that 6 out of 10 Americans to this day question for veracity, for believability. And then I realized if we don't have elections and we don't start taking the Secretary of State race serious, then we will lose this country.
So as the Secretary of State in Ohio, you'll be in charge. Obviously, we talked about elections, business services, public records, and you'll sit on a few commissions. So staying with the election integrity, I think it was March 17, 2022, the Ohio Department of Health ordered polling locations closed by Dr. Amy Acton. And then Frank LaRose, who's the current Secretary of State, issued a directive postponing those elections to June 2nd, 2020. What could you have done different? What are you going to bring about as Secretary of State that will allow for election integrity and for something like that never to happen again? Because I know there are a lot of folks around me, around us, and around Ohio that believed that was wrong the way they did that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would never cancel an election for a public health emergency. I've made that clear. Now a law has been passed so that it cannot be allowed. But what I think is most important about that particular incident is all of those elected officials who allowed the governor to move in that direction and Amy Acton to take control as an unelected public health administrator, what did they say at the time to push back against that? I mean, they were duly elected officers, right? They were not appointed by the governor. They were elected by the people. And they all went along to go along. And that's the same group of people that are running again for office. And so if we continue to elect the same group of folks who continue to seat hop in Columbus, why would we expect that the people's interest is going to be met when in the end, the loyalties are to those who are within the system? And so when it comes to this issue, and I'm running against a competitor who's seat hopping, he announced that he wanted to be the governor in January. And when he saw Vivek Ramaswamy enter the race in Ohio and could not beat him, then he pulled back that announcement. And then he said he wanted to be the Secretary of State while he proceeded to run for lieutenant governor appointment, like all of them did. So,
right.
So clearly this has to change in Ohio for us to get results. And my entire 3 years as a statewide constituent advocate, if you want to call it, for this issue of election integrity, really is indicative of me being the most qualified and competent candidate for the job. And because I've already demonstrated in the military that I'm willing to sacrifice promotion in my career, right, for the sake of doing the right thing in my informed conscience, I bring that into this job in 2026 with our elections coming up on May 5th, 2026. I have no qualms in taking an independent position on that because I'm elected by the people. So for those who are considering this candidacy and considering a political outsider, they can rest assured that my track record already shows that I'm willing to take the courage and be the outsider, even when I have a position of authority.
Outstanding. Yeah, we in the Montgomery County area, so we're close to Wright-Patterson. There was a lot of people being forced into that, and I don't look at them in any negative way, because they felt, a lot of people that did take the vaccine didn't push back. They had a hard time, but when the folks that did, that takes some real tomatoes to do. Yeah, Robert Sprague, you're gonna be running against. He announced he was running for governor. You mentioned January. Well, you said January, but it was January 18th. And then he changed his mind. And then on February 5th of 2025, he announced he was running for Secretary of State, and then endorsed Vivek Ramaswamy. So what are your thoughts on how that, I guess, kind of the insiders, the gatekeepers of the party, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, these people are not running to do the job. They're always campaigning for their next job. And I'm running to do the job. And I'm running to get in, do my 4 years, 8 years, and be done, right? I really do want to be enjoying my civilian life. I'm 43 years old. I have the youth to do it, the vigor. I've been to 46 different counties. I'm doing direct voter engagement. I'm building the largest field army of volunteers that any executive statewide candidate has. And that would be a very uplifting quality to bring into the 2026 election, that a lot of people are expecting people without President Trump on the ballot to stay home. So I think that's an attractive quality. The fact, too, is I've been endorsed by General Michael Flynn, President Trump's national security advisor, Cleta Mitchell, one of our nation's foremost advisors on assuring fair, honest, secure elections, and has done it. And so I have significant support both at the national level, but also state level, where it matters. It's not just your standard endorsements that come from your friends in the state house, in the Senate, who trade favors for endorsements, and regardless of who runs, they're always going to support. So that's the way Ohio's system is. And I don't think that system is holding anymore. And I'll tell you, when you look at who I am and where I've come from, right, in 6 months and done some internal polling, I mean, our name ID exceeds our competitors by 20 points. We have 1,000 people that have taken a survey, not all people that just associate with our candidacy. And we're at 69%, and the other person's at 40. And the same thing with who's going to vote for who, 65 to 6. Those are lopsided, but that's the sample size is going to grow. We have a professional team that is working to win this election. We've raised several $100,000 on the way to $1 million, and that just doesn't happen for what somebody would term a grassroots candidacy. So we are demonstrating that we're sophisticated, we're driven, we're trying to give the people of Ohio a choice this election that isn't some hand-picked insiders. And to be honest, it's working. We just got a major endorsement from Butler County. Butler County is the 7th largest in the state of Ohio. And their central committee, who heard my presentation and heard my competitor's presentation and got a chance to ask us questions, voted 70% to endorse our candidacy. So we are shaking up Ohio's politics with an earthquake. And I think it could not come too soon, considering that the state has for a long time not reflected in terms of its voting pattern, the policies that come with it.
Excellent. Yeah, Butler County has some pretty individual thinkers out there. It's refreshing to see on my end. As Secretary of State, you'll be in charge of appointing county election officials, training them, supervising them, things like that. What are some criteria that you are going to use to appoint those election officials and help training them and supervising them? Yeah.
Well, they got to follow the Constitution and the law. And if I'm issuing directives, they got to follow them. And we got to create a system of accountability. In fact, the current director of Montgomery County, at one point last year, I brought a lawsuit and won at the Ohio Supreme Court for that director's failure to train me as a poll worker to identify non-citizen markings on the back of driver's licenses. That was part of a voter ID law that was passed in Ohio. And the Secretary of State, current Secretary of State, did issue a proper directive. And so what's happened in many cases is Board of Election directors are appointed by the county GOP chairs, or the party that wins the predominant election for Secretary of State. And some of them have been wonderful. They do a great job, just like any other workforce. I think what I bring is a military mindset of accountability. And that's different. A lot of folks who are enmeshed within the political system, they don't want to ruffle feathers. They don't want to create predicament for their friends or the party chairs. I'm willing to look at and work toward a system of merit. Many of these elected officials I will work with and partner with, but I honestly think we got to create a culture of accountability from the very top. And so I want to create proper guidance, proper directs. I want to remove cumbersome work that isn't necessary from them so they can focus on better eligibility verification. I want to get to a same-day in-person system of pre-printed hand-markable ballots that is fully accounted across all portions of the vote and vote casting process. I want to save Ohioans a lot of money where we don't need to be spending it. And I want to encourage people and bring them, incentivize them to get involved, because I'm very concerned, particularly in rural parts of the state, where there are fewer and fewer poll workers that are aging out. And that's leading to precincts that are being consolidated. And then the further precincts get consolidated, the further people have to travel in order to go vote on election day. And what that leads to, Truman, is eventually the offer of not having to go in person, which I believe is where policies have been both for Republicans and Democrats, encouraging people to not have to go vote on election day. And I think that's headed in the wrong direction, especially when our votes are recorded inside of software that cannot be independently verified. And there's a lot of people who don't trust computerized systems, and they have good reason to. I can say and attest as somebody who's looked at a lot of security breaches and information system requirements. We have a system that's 20 years outdated for those computerized systems and protecting them. And that has to change. And I'm the right person to do that. Excellent.
So there is an aspect to the position of Secretary of State that works with businesses, registering them and things like that. Are there any things that you can do that can help combat some of the fraud that is now being brought to the surface by different independent journalists and things like that?
Yeah, there's a lot, right? I worked at a joint interagency task force in the Capital Region with a number of three-letter agencies in the Department of Defense to get at trans-regional terrorism. We need a similar statewide task force that's extended by the governor's authority that would include, for example, the Attorney General, the Medicare Control Fraud Unit, 160 investigators. Combine that effort with the Secretary of State's Public Integrity Division. We need the Department of Youth and Children, in this case for daycares, to play a greater role in identifying those non-compliant businesses. And then this task force working with the auditor would self-identify these businesses and investigate them if they are in breach of their federal requirements for receiving grant money. Now we're headed in that direction as far as legislation is concerned, with unannounced visits, enhanced surveillance and verifiability of attendance. But that's going to take some time. It sounds like the legislation is going to only go active 12 months after it's been approved. Ohio's legislature can take up to a year or two to push it through. We never know where the governor is going to go on it. But I honestly think that my background lends itself to being able to participate in guide and lead this statewide task force. And because I have that position, has the responsibility of business registration. Of course, if we identify a business that's been acting in a criminal or fraudulent manner, we can dissolve that business. We can decertify it. And we can refer it criminally. And if somebody who set that business up, for example, is a naturalized citizen and they committed that, we can also refer them to the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of State for denaturalization and, if required, deportation. Because again, if people have come into this country on the basis of defrauding us and sending our money, particularly for militant groups overseas, which is something that I have experienced and seen in 2017, we don't want that. Here's the other thing I would do, though, separate from the Somali issue of fraud that's prevalent. Please. I think that small businesses need a system where they can better see and track where their business application is. Today, if you apply for business in Ohio, it's about a 3 to 5 day process online. You submit the required documentation. It's fairly straightforward, but you never quite know what the feedback and the user interface is in terms of where your application is and how it's being assessed. Also, if you're a business owner and you need a license for something, whatever it is, let's say a liquor license, you have to go to each and every separate agency to go get your occupational license. Why couldn't we have a system that combines it on one business hub? So that if you fill out a form to register your business in Ohio, why couldn't that information system reflect that form when it's time for you to apply for an occupational license, which is something the Secretary of State is not involved in? So what I'm saying, Truman, is we have so much fragmentation and bureaucracy that a person has to somehow intuitively know as a small business, I go here, I go there, then I have to wait here. We need to create a central hub for that. We need some better information systems that actually integrate and are more interoperable for that purpose, so that this whole process is more transparent and more efficient for the business owner.
Excellent. As Secretary of State, there will be times where you have to work with the state legislature. How do you plan to work with the state legislature to accomplish your goals?
Well, I've already been doing it. That's the good news. Even when I was not, and I've never been an elected official, which is probably my advantage as well. But I did sit down and I did work with writing legislation, 3 different bills, HB 472, HB 552, and I supported HB 577. All of these were to enhance voter verification methods to ensure that only proper people get enrolled to vote and have their votes count. So that was the area of weakness. And so I have extensive experience both giving proponent testimony, working with the entity that writes the actual legislation for Ohio's legislators. They're known as the Legislative Services Commission. And I understand how business works. And I understand I've already developed those relationships. At one point, I wrote a letter that was signed by 27 state house reps. So I'm becoming pretty well known among the state house reps, and especially now that I'm running for office, I'm getting several of them to come out and fully endorse. And that's a big deal because they're choosing to do that over someone who's been in politics for over 2 decades.
Excellent. There is, so let's kind of fast forward. So it's May 6th. You've won the primary. We'll pretend. There are 2 Democrats running. Brian Hambly, he's an oncologist at UC. And then there's Allison Russo, who was the minority House leader. From what I see from her on social media, she's very left-wing. What are some of your ideas to go through the general election and actually win that?
We have to be able to match energy for energy and message for message. Clearly, nobody at this stage of the race and any of the candidates, Republican, Democrat, have the depth of knowledge that I have about the election systems and the job that I want to take on. She's kind of like my opponent. She's rotating into that seat on the basis of longevity, and she sees an opening to advance her political career. Her intention is to reduce the safeguards in Ohio's system, and I intend to call her out on that. There's a ballot initiative going around by the Democrats to remove the voter ID and make it optional, to get to an automatic voter registration system, which enhances the prospects of non-citizens getting on the voter rolls, to do same-day voter registration, which means there's no time for an election official to truly qualify someone. Even today, they don't have the identity, residency, and citizenship information. These are all radical ideas. And so with the way the Democrats work is they get the order and the memo that comes from DC and the legal firms that are fighting all the election integrity, and they basically stick to the same playbook. That's why they have the same messaging. So they're not really operating as an independent entity in that regard. They've got their advisors in that way. I'm an active, dynamic candidate. I go out, I answer questions. She's also dynamic. She's outgoing. So we need to have a strong matchup. Okay, not one where we have a passive Republican who kind of waits to see where things go, right? My competitor, who's got a much more subdued personality. We need somebody who's going to go out there, is going to take the shots when somebody tries to call them names, and isn't going to shirk from the name calling. And I think that doesn't faze me. And again, because I've got the depth of the topical knowledge, we're going to be consolidating support on May 6th, and we're going to have national level support all the way up to the White House, and we're going to win. And we're going to uplift all of the ticket again, because we are bringing a base voter right now who can actually see somebody who wants to get things done on their behalf.
Excellent. One of the hot topic issues that's going around Ohio is property taxes. Property taxes could impact businesses. Are there any, what are your ideas on property tax and the elimination, the citizens initiative that's going around? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I signed the initiative. I'm the only candidate in the statewide office of Secretary of State that backs this committee to abolish property tax. And I'm proud to say that because I recognize that $74 billion was our budget 2022, and it's now up to $105 billion. So we have runaway spending in all departments. And when you look at almost half of our budget being the Medicaid and the federal programs for that, and now we can see that there's a path of that money in the billions being sifted out of the system. I think that there is a way for us to modify different levels of revenue and income beyond what the legislature is saying, because what they're telling people is if we get rid of this, we won't be able to pay for fundamental services like firefighters, police, and of course, schools. And I think that that's a disingenuous argument at this point when the legislature has not fully taken into account the actual revenue, the actual spending that they have going on. And so until we as the general public can see how much of the $20 billion or so can be made up with the removal of the fraud, with the removal of programs that are unnecessary, for example, all of these tax abatements for data centers, I mean, that's what makes people upset about this. Why are we cutting deals for stadiums? Why are we cutting deals for abetments? When many of these companies who get those deals, like Intel, are telling us now they're not going to deliver real business and real jobs till 2030 and beyond. Who's accountable for that? And that frustrates people because, again, while they did pass some legislation to cap the rise, which I welcome in the legislature, we all know if it wasn't for the people of Ohio pushing this citizen ballot initiative forward, this legislature would not have gotten that straightened out because of it. So we need to support citizen movements like this at a minimum because it's a forcing function. And that's how real results happen. So we have to keep pushing for them. And I back them up. If you go to my X page at Marcell Strbich or you go to my Facebook page at Marcell Strbich for Ohio, you'll see I made a video on it. And many of those folks that are out there collecting signatures are also going to be door knocking. And I welcome them to join this campaign because, again, we all have to combine efforts in order to affect the change for our cost of living in our future.
Marcell Strbich, thank you very much. Is there anything that I did not ask you that you would like to tell folks watching today?
I'm grateful for everybody's support, your prayers, you're welcoming me across the campaign trail. I'm doing this for a cause because I believe in it, and I don't want my kids to experience what I had to endure and others during the COVID mandate. And there's a lot of unsettled work to do to preserve liberty in this country. Because of shows like this, and because of many patriotic Ohioans, I'm asking you to go out and tell people about my candidacy. Go to my website at Strbich for Ohio, Strbich, spelled out FOR, Ohio.com. And if you can volunteer, if you can donate, everything I should say matters for us to get our name recognition up and to have a great shot to win this. Our election is May 5th. Early voting begins April 7th. This is a huge opportunity for us to put people in office who prioritize people, not special interests. And so I will serve you well like I served you in the military for 20 years and on to victory. Thank you.
Thanks again, and thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time on Truman's Town Hall.